The research vessel Starlight Dawn glided through the void of space like a delicate crystal butterfly, its translucent hull reflecting the distant stars and rainbow, patterns that would have been beautiful to any species capable of appreciating such things. Inside the ship's medical bay, Dr. Zara Cathani pressed her long, slender fingers against the viewing port and watched the massive human space station grow larger with each passing moment. Her pale, almost transparent skin shimmered with nervous energy as bioluminescent patterns danced across her crystalline features. Zara had studied the preliminary data about humans for months, but nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to witness. The Veltar species had evolved on a low-gravity world where the atmosphere was gentle and the environment predictable. Her people were tall and graceful, with hollow bones that made them light as air and skin that could photosynthesize energy from their sun. They lived for centuries in perfect harmony with their world, never needing to struggle or fight for survival. The space station called New Horizon looked nothing like Veltar architecture, where her people built with flowing curves and organic shapes. The humans had created something that looked like it was designed to withstand a war. Thick metal plates covered every surface, and the structure itself seemed to radiate an aura of strength and durability that made Zara's delicate sensibilities recoil slightly. Captain Jake Morrison was waiting for them in the docking bay, and when Zara first laid eyes on him, she nearly stumbled backward in shock. The human was shorter than she had expected, but what he lacked in height he made up for in sheer physical presence. His shoulders were broad and muscular, his arms looked like they could crush steel, and when he moved, Zara could see the interplay of dense muscle fibers beneath his skin. Jake extended his hand in the traditional human greeting, and when Zara tentatively reached out to touch it, she was amazed by the texture. His skin was thick and rough, nothing like the smooth, delicate surface of Veltar flesh. His grip was firm but controlled, and she could feel the incredible strength contained within those fingers. Her instruments immediately began taking readings, and what they detected made her internal organs flutter with excitement. The human's bone density was unlike anything in her species' medical databases. Where Veltar bones were hollow and light, Jake's skeleton was dense and heavy, built like the framework of a fortress. His cardiovascular system operated at pressures that would literally cause a Veltar heart to explode. Yet he seemed completely comfortable and relaxed. The muscle fibers in his arms and legs contained protein structures that her people had never encountered before, and the way they moved beneath his skin suggested a level of physical power that bordered on the impossible. Dr. Lisa Grant, the station's chief medical officer, joined them for the tour, and Zara found herself fascinated by the differences between the two humans. Where Jake was built like a warrior, Lisa was smaller and more compact, but she possessed the same underlying strength that seemed to characterize all members of their species. When Lisa lifted a heavy equipment case that would have required 3 Veltar to move, she did it with casual ease, as if the weight meant nothing to her. The tour of the medical facilities revealed even more shocking discoveries. The human medical equipment was designed to handle trauma and injuries that would be instantly fatal to most known species. Bone saws, surgical tools, and diagnostic equipment all seemed built for creatures whose bodies could withstand incredible punishment and still function. The emergency room contained supplies for treating radiation exposure, severe burns, and massive physical trauma, all conditions that would never occur in Veltar space because their bodies were too fragile to survive such things. When Jake demonstrated the station's artificial gravity system, Zara watched in amazement as he adjusted the settings to show her how humans lived. At 1 gravity he moved normally, but when he increased it to 2 gravities, something remarkable happened. Instead of being crushed by the increased weight, Jake's body seemed to adapt almost instantly. His muscles tensed and compensated, his breathing remained steady, and he continued moving with only slightly reduced efficiency. Zara tried the same experiment and immediately collapsed to her knees, her hollow bones threatening to crack under the pressure. Jake quickly returned the gravity to normal and helped her to her feet, his touch gentle despite the obvious strength in his hands. She realized then that humans didn't just possess incredible physical capabilities. They had evolved to live in conditions that would kill her people without hesitation. The medical scans that Lisa performed on both species revealed the most shocking differences of all. Human blood carried oxygen at concentrations that would be toxic to Veltar physiology. Their hearts beat with a force that could power machinery, and their nervous systems operated at speeds that made her species' reflexes seem sluggish by comparison. Even their brain activity showed patterns of electrical activity that suggested cognitive processing at rates far beyond what her people could achieve. As the day progressed, Zara began to understand that she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Humans weren't just another species to be studied and catalogued. They were biological marvels, creatures whose bodies had been forged in conditions so harsh that they had developed capabilities that other species couldn't even imagine. Every system in their bodies, from their dense bones to their powerful hearts, was optimized for survival in a way that made them seem almost like living machines. When the tour concluded and Zara returned to her quarters aboard the Starlight, she spent hours reviewing the data her instruments had collected. The readings were so extraordinary that she checked them multiple times, certain that there must be some error in her equipment. But the numbers didn't lie. Humans possessed physical capabilities that redefined what organic life could achieve, and she was probably the first scientist in the galaxy to truly understand what that meant. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Zara's mind was filled with questions about these remarkable creatures and their impossible biology. She knew that her research had only just begun, and that the discoveries waiting for her would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about the limits of biological evolution. The next morning, Zara approached Dr. Lisa Grant with a request that would change her entire understanding of human biology. She wanted to conduct comparative physiology studies between her species and the humans, and Lisa was more than willing to help. The human doctor seemed genuinely curious about Veltar physiology, and together they designed a series of tests that would push the boundaries of what both species could endure. The first test was simple endurance, something that Zara believed would be relatively easy to measure and compare. She had brought sophisticated monitoring equipment from her homeworld, devices that could track heart rate, oxygen consumption, muscle efficiency, and dozens of other biological markers with precision that exceeded anything in human medical technology. What she discovered during that first test session would haunt her dreams for weeks to come. Tony Walsh volunteered to be the first human subject, a maintenance worker who seemed completely ordinary by human standards. He was average height, average build, and spoke with the casual confidence that Zara was beginning to recognize as typically human. When he stepped onto the treadmill in the station's fitness center, Zara expected to see the same patterns of exertion and fatigue that characterized all biological life forms throughout the galaxy. The test began at a moderate pace, something that would be considered a brisk walk for most species. Tony's heart rate increased slightly, his breathing deepened, and his muscles began working in the rhythmic pattern that Zara's instruments could detect and measure. She monitored his vital signs carefully, watching for the inevitable signs of fatigue that would force him to slow down or stop. After 30 minutes, Tony was still running at the same steady pace, showing no signs of distress. His heart rate had stabilized at a level that would be considered dangerous for a Veltar, but his breathing remained controlled and even. Zara increased the speed of the treadmill, expecting to see the rapid deterioration that would indicate he was approaching his limits. At 1 hour, Tony was still running, and something impossible began to happen. Instead of becoming less efficient as fatigue set in, his body was actually improving its performance. His heart rate, rather than continuing to climb, had stabilized at a level that suggested his cardiovascular system was adapting to the demands being placed on it. His muscles were consuming oxygen more efficiently, and his body temperature was regulating itself with a precision that seemed almost mechanical. Zara checked her instruments repeatedly, certain that they must be malfunctioning. No biological system could maintain such performance for extended periods without breaking down. The fundamental laws of physiology demanded that energy expenditure would eventually exceed energy production, leading to fatigue, exhaustion, and eventual collapse. But Tony continued running as if he could maintain the pace indefinitely. At the 2-hour mark, Tony was still going strong, and Zara was beginning to panic. Her own species would have collapsed from exhaustion within minutes of such activity. The dense, oxygen-rich atmosphere of the station was making her feel dizzy just from observing, and the thought of sustained physical exertion for hours was beyond her ability to comprehend. Tony finally stopped the test himself, not because he was exhausted, but because he had other duties to attend to. He stepped off the treadmill with barely elevated breathing, wiped the sweat from his forehead with a towel, and asked if there was anything else Zara needed from him. The casual way he dismissed what should have been an extraordinary feat of endurance made Zara realize that humans didn't even consider such performance unusual. The real shock came later that day when maintenance worker Amy Johnson accidentally cut her hand on a sharp metal panel while helping with some routine repairs. Zara witnessed the injury happen and immediately rushed to help, expecting to see the slow, careful healing process that characterized all biological life as she knew it. Instead, she watched something that challenged everything she thought she knew about organic tissue repair. Within minutes, the bleeding had stopped completely, and Amy's body had begun the healing process with an efficiency that seemed almost supernatural. Where a Veltar would require weeks of careful medical treatment and specialized healing chambers, Amy's wound was closing visibly within hours. Zara convinced Amy to let her monitor the healing process, and what she discovered was revolutionary. Human tissue didn't just repair itself, it actively improved its structure during the healing process. The new skin that formed over Amy's cut was actually stronger than the original tissue, and the underlying muscle and nerve fibers were reorganizing themselves in ways that would prevent similar injuries in the future. The speed of the healing was only part of what amazed Zara. Amy continued working throughout the day, using her injured hand as if the wound was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. The pain that would have incapacitated a Veltar for days seemed to have no effect on Amy's ability to function normally. She laughed about the injury, made jokes about her clumsiness, and showed no signs of the weakness or vulnerability that should have accompanied such trauma. Lisa explained that Amy's injury was considered minor by human standards, and that their bodies were designed to heal from much more serious damage. She showed Zara medical records of crew members who had recovered from injuries that would have been instantly fatal to any Veltar. Broken bones that healed stronger than before, burns that regenerated without scarring, and tissue damage that repaired itself completely within days or weeks. The more Zara learned about human healing capabilities, the more she realized that their bodies were operating on principles that were completely foreign to the rest of the galaxy. They didn't just survive injury, they used it as an opportunity to become stronger and more resilient. Their biological systems seemed to view trauma as a challenge to be overcome rather than a threat to be avoided. As the days passed, Zara began to understand that she was witnessing something that would revolutionize galactic medicine. Human bodies possessed regenerative capabilities that exceeded anything in known science, and their endurance capacities suggested that they had evolved under conditions that would be considered impossible for organic life. She was studying creatures whose biology defied the fundamental laws that governed every other species in the galaxy, and the implications of her discoveries were staggering. 3 weeks after beginning her research, Zara received an opportunity that would change everything she thought she knew about human survival capabilities. A routine supply mission to the mining planet Kepler 442B needed an additional scientist to analyze mineral samples, and Zara volunteered to join the expedition. She hoped that observing humans in a more challenging environment would provide new insights into their remarkable biology. The mission team consisted of Security Chief Ryan Beck, a man whose physical presence made even the intimidating Jake Morrison seem small by comparison, and pilot Kate Williams, whose compact frame concealed what Zara was learning was typical human strength. The mining planet was known for its harsh conditions, but it was considered safe enough for regular supply runs. and Zara looked forward to studying human adaptation in a different environment. The shuttle trip to Kepler 442b began normally, with Kate piloting their small craft through the routine hyperspace jump that would deliver them to their destination. Zara spent the journey taking baseline readings of both humans, noting how their bodies maintained perfect homeostasis even in the cramped confines of the shuttle. Their breathing remained steady, their heart rates were calm, and their muscle tension showed no signs of the stress that would have affected any Veltar in similar circumstances. When they dropped out of hyperspace, Kate immediately began cursing in a way that made Zara's translation device struggle to find appropriate equivalents. The navigation system had malfunctioned during the jump, and they were nowhere near their intended destination. Instead of the familiar mining planet, they found themselves in orbit around a world that looked like something from a nightmare. The planet below was a frozen wasteland covered in toxic storms with an atmosphere that would kill most known life forms within minutes. The temperature readings showed conditions that were far below what any biological system should be able to survive, and the atmospheric composition included chemicals that would dissolve Veltar tissue on contact. When Kate announced that their engines had been damaged during the emergency exit from hyperspace, Zara felt her already fragile heart began to race with terror. The shuttle crashed on the planet's surface with a violence that should have killed them all instantly. Zara's safety restraints held, but the impact left her dazed and disoriented. When she finally regained consciousness, she expected to find herself dying alongside the broken bodies of her human companions. Instead, she discovered something that challenged every assumption she had made about biological limits. Ryan had not only survived the crash completely unharmed, but he was already moving around the wreckage with purposeful efficiency. His body showed no signs of trauma from the impact that had left Zara barely conscious, and he was assessing their situation with a clarity of thought that seemed impossible under such circumstances. When he helped Zara out of her restraints, his hands were steady and his voice was calm, as if crashing on a hostile alien world was just another routine problem to be solved. Kate was equally unaffected by their situation, checking the shuttle's systems and calculating their survival options with the same casual competence she had shown during routine flight operations. When she announced that the communication system was destroyed and that rescue was unlikely, she delivered the news with the matter-of-fact tone that someone might use to discuss the weather. The toxic atmosphere outside the shuttle would have killed Zara within seconds of exposure, but when a breach in the hull began leaking the poisonous gases inside, both humans reacted with adaptations that defied everything she knew about biology. Ryan's respiratory system somehow adjusted to filter out the worst of the toxins, allowing him to continue functioning while he sealed the breach. Kate's body temperature regulation kicked into overdrive, maintaining her core heat despite the freezing conditions that were making Zara's crystalline skin crack from the cold. Over the next 3 days, Zara watched her human companions demonstrate survival capabilities that seemed to come from some kind of biological perfection. Ryan's body adapted to the reduced caloric intake by becoming more efficient, extracting maximum energy from their limited food supplies. His muscle mass didn't decrease despite the lack of proper nutrition, and his strength seemed to increase. As their situation became more desperate, Kate's sensory systems adapted to the low-light conditions inside the damaged shuttle, allowing her to navigate and work in darkness that left Zara completely helpless. Her reflexes became faster and more precise as stress hormones flooded her system, and her ability to make complex calculations while under extreme pressure suggested cognitive enhancements that shouldn't have been possible for organic brains. Both humans began exhibiting what they called adrenaline responses, physiological changes that transformed them from ordinary people into something that resembled biological machines designed for survival. Their heart rates increased but stabilized at levels that improved their performance rather than exhausting them. Their blood chemistry changed to provide enhanced oxygen delivery to their muscles and brains. Their pain tolerance increased dramatically, allowing them to perform tasks that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. When Ryan cut his arm while repairing the shuttle's life support system, Zara watched in amazement as his body not only stopped the bleeding within minutes, but actually seemed to use the injury as a catalyst for improved performance. His immune system activated with an efficiency that prevented infection. His healing mechanisms began working immediately, and his overall energy levels increased rather than decreased. Kate's body showed similar adaptations when she suffered a minor burn while working with the damaged electrical systems. Instead of being weakened by the injury, she became more focused and determined, her pain response somehow converting the trauma into enhanced cognitive function. Her hands became steadier, her thinking became clearer, and her ability to solve complex technical problems improved dramatically. The rescue ship found them on the fourth day, and when the recovery team expressed amazement that anyone had survived such conditions, Ryan and Kate seemed genuinely surprised by the reaction. To them, their survival had been a matter of applying basic human capabilities to a challenging but manageable situation. They had no idea that what they had accomplished was impossible by the standards of every other known species in the galaxy. As they returned to New Horizons Station, Zara realized that her research had revealed something profound about human evolution. These creatures hadn't just adapted to survive in harsh conditions. They had been forged by environments so hostile that they had developed capabilities that made them nearly indestructible by galactic standards. After returning from the harrowing experience on the hostile planet, Zara found herself obsessed with understanding the healing capabilities she had witnessed. The way Ryan and Kate had not only survived their injuries, but seemed to become stronger. Because of them challenged everything she thought she knew about biological systems. She approached Commander Steve Adams with a request that would have been considered unusual by human standards, but was absolutely necessary for her research. Steve was a veteran officer who had served on deep space missions for over 20 years, and his body told the story of a life spent in dangerous environments. When Zara explained that she wanted to study human medical cases and recovery patterns, Steve was more than willing to help. He understood that her research could benefit both species, and he gave her access to the medical files that would revolutionize her understanding of human biology. The first case that captured Zara's attention was engineer Maria Santos, a woman whose medical history read like something from a science fiction story. 2 years earlier, Maria had suffered a spinal injury during a reactor accident that should have left her permanently paralyzed, according to every medical text in the Veltar database. The damage to her nervous system had been so severe that most species would have considered her condition hopeless and focused on making her comfortable until death. Instead, Maria had not only recovered completely, but had returned to active duty with enhanced reflexes and improved cognitive function. When Zara met her, Maria was working on complex engineering projects that required precise motor control and spatial reasoning abilities that exceeded her pre-injury capabilities. The woman seemed completely unaware that she had accomplished something that was medically impossible by galactic standards. Dr. Lisa Grant provided Zara with detailed brain scans that showed exactly how Maria's recovery had occurred, and the images revealed something that shook Zara to her core. Maria's nervous system had literally rewired itself, creating new pathways around the damaged areas with a precision that exceeded anything known medical science could achieve. Her brain had grown new connections, her spinal cord had developed alternative routes for neural signals, and her entire nervous system had reorganized itself to not only restore function but to improve it. The brain scans showed patterns of neural activity that were unlike anything in Zara's extensive database of galactic species. Where most creatures would have shown dead tissue and failed connections, Maria's nervous system displayed a web of new growth that was more efficient than the original configuration. Her brain had not just healed, it had evolved during the recovery process to create better pathways for information processing and motor control. When Zara questioned Maria about her recovery, the human woman described the process in terms that suggested she had experienced conscious control over her own healing. She had felt her body working to repair itself, had been aware of new connections forming in her brain, and had actively participated in the rebuilding process through what she called determination and willpower. The idea that consciousness could influence biological healing was completely foreign to Veltar. Understanding of medicine. The medical files contained dozens of similar cases, each one more extraordinary than the last. Crew members who had recovered from radiation exposure that should have caused immediate death, workers who had survived burns that covered most of their bodies, and soldiers who had healed from trauma that would have been instantly fatal to any other known species. Each case showed the same pattern of not just recovery, but actual improvement beyond original capabilities. Zara spent weeks studying the case of maintenance worker Billy Chun, who had been exposed to lethal levels of radiation during a reactor breach. According to the medical records, Billy's cellular structure had been so damaged that his DNA should have been completely destroyed. Instead of dying, his body had somehow repaired the genetic damage and developed resistance to radiation that exceeded anything seen in nature. He had not only survived, but had become virtually immune to the type of exposure that had nearly killed him. The healing process in Billy's case had taken only weeks, during which time his body had rebuilt itself at the cellular level. His immune system had learned to recognize and eliminate radiation-damaged cells before they could cause problems. His DNA repair mechanisms had become more efficient than they had been before the accident, and his overall health had improved dramatically. By the time he returned to duty, Billy was stronger, faster, and more resilient than he had been before the incident. Dr. Grant explained that such cases were not considered unusual by human medical standards, and that the human body's ability to adapt and overcome trauma was simply part of their normal biology. She showed Zara statistics that revealed average human recovery rates from injuries that would be considered miracles by any other species. Broken bones that healed stronger than before, damaged organs that regenerated completely, and immune systems that became more effective after fighting off diseases. The most shocking discovery came when Zara analyzed the genetic patterns in the recovered patients. Their DNA showed evidence of active rewriting during the healing process, with genetic sequences that improved their resistance to whatever had caused their injuries. The humans were not just healing from trauma, they were evolving in real time to become better adapted to survive similar threats in the future. When Zara compiled her findings and transmitted them to the Veltar Science Council, the response was immediate and skeptical. The council members refused to believe that any biological system could possess such capabilities, and they demanded additional evidence to support her claims. Several prominent scientists suggested that her instruments were malfunctioning or that she was misinterpreting the data, because the results were so far beyond the known limits of organic life. The rejection of her findings by her own people only strengthened Zara's determination to understand human biology. She realized that she was witnessing something that would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about the possibilities of biological evolution. Humans had developed capabilities that seemed to violate the fundamental laws of physics and biology, and she was probably the first scientist to recognize the true implications of what she was observing. As she prepared to present her research to the broader galactic scientific community, Zara knew that her discoveries would be met with disbelief and skepticism. The idea that humans could heal from injuries that were fatal to other species, that their bodies could improve through trauma, and that their consciousness could influence their own biological processes was too revolutionary for most scientists to accept. But the evidence was undeniable, and she was determined to prove that humans represented something unprecedented in the galaxy's understanding of what life could achieve. The alarm systems throughout New Horizons Station began blaring at 0300 hours, jolting Zara from her sleep with a sound that sent waves of panic through her crystalline nervous system. She had been dreaming of home, of the peaceful gardens and gentle atmosphere of her homeworld, when the harsh reality of human existence crashed back into her consciousness. The emergency lights bathed everything in red, and the announcement over the communication system made her blood freeze in her veins. Hostile raiders had emerged from hyperspace and were attacking the station with overwhelming force. These were not the civilized disputes that occasionally occurred between Veltar colonies. but actual warfare involving weapons designed to kill and destroy. Zara's people had not experienced genuine combat for thousands of years, and the concept of organized violence was so foreign to her psychology that she could barely comprehend what was happening. From her quarters, she could hear the sounds of humans preparing for battle, and what she witnessed challenged every assumption she had made about civilized behavior. Instead of the panic and chaos that would have consumed any Veltar population facing such a threat, the humans moved with purposeful efficiency that suggested they had been born for exactly this type of situation. Lieutenant Don Cooper appeared in her doorway within minutes of the alarm, his transformation from the calm, friendly officer she had known into something that resembled a biological weapon was so complete that she barely recognized him. His eyes had become focused and alert in a way that seemed to pierce through solid matter. His movements had acquired a fluid grace that suggested perfect control over every muscle in his body, and his voice carried an authority that made her instinctively want to obey his commands. Don escorted her to the station's command center, where she could observe the battle without being in immediate danger, and what she saw there would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life. The humans had transformed from the peaceful scientists and workers she had been studying into something that resembled a perfectly coordinated military machine. Every person on the station had a role to play in the defense, and they executed their duties with a precision that exceeded anything she had seen in Veltar. Technology. Sergeant Beth Turner was coordinating the defensive response from the tactical station, and watching her work was like observing a master artist creating a deadly symphony. Her fingers moved across the control panels with speed that made Zara's eyes water. Her voice issued commands with clarity that cut through the chaos of battle, and her mind processed information at rates that seemed to exceed the capabilities of organic brains. The attacking raiders were a species that Zara recognized from galactic databases as the Korthek, a warrior race that had successfully conquered dozens of star systems through superior technology and ruthless tactics. They were larger than humans, possessed natural armor plating, and had weapons that could pierce through most known defensive systems. According to every military analysis in the galaxy, they should have been able to overwhelm the human station within minutes. Instead, Zara watched in amazement as the human defenders not only held their ground but began to gain the upper hand against supposedly superior opponents. The difference was not in their weapons or technology, but in the way their bodies responded to the stress of combat. Under battle conditions, humans underwent physiological changes that transformed them into something that transcended normal biological limits. Dan's reaction time accelerated to levels that her instruments could barely measure. His spatial awareness expanded to include threats that were beyond the range of normal senses, and his tactical thinking operated at speeds that seemed to bypass conscious thought entirely. When he moved through the station's corridors to coordinate defensive positions, he anticipated enemy actions before they occurred and responded to threats that hadn't yet materialized. Beth demonstrated cognitive abilities that redefined what Zara thought organic brains could achieve, processing multiple streams of tactical information simultaneously, while maintaining perfect awareness of the overall battle situation. Her ability to predict enemy movements, coordinate defensive responses, and adapt to changing conditions in real time suggested mental capabilities that exceeded anything known in galactic science. The most shocking revelation came when Zara observed the human defenders engaging the Korthik raiders in direct combat. The enemy warriors were physically larger and stronger than humans. Their natural armor should have made them nearly invulnerable to human weapons, and their experience in conquering other species should have given them overwhelming tactical advantages. Instead, the humans fought with capabilities that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Their adrenaline response didn't just increase their strength and speed, it enhanced every aspect of their performance in ways that made them more dangerous than creatures specifically evolved for warfare. Their pain tolerance allowed them to continue fighting despite injuries that would have incapacitated most species. Their healing mechanisms worked in real time to maintain their combat effectiveness and their psychological responses to violence seemed to improve their performance rather than hindering it, when several Korthak warriors boarded the station through a breach in the outer hull. Zara watched Dunn and Beth engage them in close combat that demonstrated the true extent of human capabilities. The enemy fighters were equipped with advanced weapons and armor that should have made them unstoppable, but the humans moved with speed and precision that made their equipment advantages meaningless. Dan's body seemed to operate on instincts that had been refined over millions of years of evolutionary pressure. His movements flowed from one attack to another with grace that suggested perfect unity between mind and muscle, and his ability to anticipate and counter enemy actions operated at levels that transcended conscious thought. He fought like a creature that had been designed specifically for warfare, using techniques that combined intelligence, physical capability, and tactical awareness in ways that no other species had achieved. Beth demonstrated similar abilities, her compact frame concealing strength that allowed her to overpower opponents twice her size, her reflexes operating at speeds that made her seem to move between seconds, and her strategic thinking adapting to new threats faster than her enemies could react. Together, they defeated opponents that should have been superior in every measurable category. The battle lasted only 4 hours, but by the end, the Korthak raiders were retreating in confusion and terror. They had encountered something that their extensive military experience had not prepared them for, opponents whose bodies seemed to become more dangerous as the fighting intensified. The humans had not just defended their station, they had demonstrated capabilities that would force the galaxy to reconsider everything it thought it knew about the limits of biological warfare. In the weeks following the Korthak raid, Zara worked feverishly to compile her research into a comprehensive report that would shake the foundations of galactic science. The data she had collected over her months of study painted a picture of human capabilities that was so extraordinary that she knew most scientists would refuse to believe it. Yet the evidence was undeniable, and she was determined to share her discoveries with the galaxy regardless of how they would be received. The report began with detailed analysis of human physiology, documenting bone density measurements that exceeded galactic norms by factors that seemed impossible for organic life. She included cardiovascular data showing blood pressure and heart efficiency ratings that would be fatal to most known species, yet represented normal operating parameters for humans. The muscle fiber analysis revealed protein structures that had never been cataloged in any biological database, suggesting evolutionary adaptations that were unique in the galaxy. Her endurance testing results filled entire sections of the report, with graphs and charts showing human performance capabilities that redefined what organic systems could achieve. Tony Walsh's 2-hour run without fatigue had been just the beginning of her discoveries about human stamina. Additional testing had revealed that humans could maintain physical activity for periods that would kill most species through simple exhaustion, and that their bodies actually improved efficiency during sustained exertion rather than breaking down. The healing factor documentation was perhaps the most revolutionary section of her report. Maria Santos's spinal recovery, Billy Chen's radiation resistance, and dozens of other cases provided evidence that human bodies possessed regenerative capabilities that bordered on the supernatural. The brain scans showing neural rewiring, the genetic analysis revealing real-time DNA adaptation, and the cellular regeneration data all pointed to the same impossible conclusion. Humans were not just another species to be studied and cataloged. They were biological marvels whose capabilities suggested that they had evolved under conditions so harsh that they had developed into something that transcended normal organic limitations. Every system in their bodies, from their dense skeletal structure to their adaptive nervous systems, was optimized for survival in ways that other species couldn't even imagine. The combat analysis section detailed observations from the Korthak raid that demonstrated human warfare capabilities at their most extreme. Don Cooper and Beth Turner had not just fought off superior opponents. They had done so while their bodies underwent physiological enhancements that improved their performance under stress. The adrenaline response that would cripple most species actually made humans more dangerous, more focused, and more effective in combat situations. Zara's most shocking conclusion came when she analyzed the environmental data from Earth, the human homeworld whose conditions had forged them into what they had become. The planet was a nightmare of extreme weather, dangerous predators, toxic substances, and natural disasters that would have prevented the evolution of complex life on any other world in the galaxy. Yet humans had not just survived on this death world. They had thrived and eventually become its dominant species. Earth's gravity was significantly higher than most inhabited worlds, explaining the dense bone structure and powerful musculature that characterized human physiology. The atmospheric composition was rich in oxygen at concentrations that would be toxic to most species, accounting for the efficient cardiovascular systems that seemed impossible by galactic standards. The presence of dangerous microorganisms and environmental toxins had driven the evolution of immune systems that were more sophisticated than anything known to galactic medicine. The predators that had shared Earth with early humans were creatures of such size and ferocity that simply surviving in their presence had required the development of reflexes, strength, and tactical thinking that exceeded anything seen on civilized worlds. The climate variations and natural disasters had selected for adaptability and resilience that made humans capable of surviving in conditions that would be instantly fatal to most galactic species. When Zara presented her findings to the Galactic Council, the reaction was exactly what she had expected. The assembled representatives from dozens of species listened to her presentation with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright disbelief. The Veltar delegation was particularly vocal in their criticism, suggesting that her instruments had malfunctioned or that she had misinterpreted the data because the results were so far beyond accepted biological norms. The Korthek representative was more thoughtful in his response, acknowledging that his people's recent encounter with human defenders had forced them to reconsider their understanding of combat capabilities. He described the battle from his species' perspective, confirming Zara's observations about human performance under extreme stress. His testimony carried weight because the Korthik were recognized as the galaxy's premier warriors, and their admission that humans had outfought them was significant. Other council members raised questions about the implications of Zara's discoveries. If humans possessed such extraordinary capabilities, what did that mean for galactic civilization? How should other species interact with creatures whose bodies were essentially biological weapon systems? The debate that followed her presentation lasted for days and revealed deep concerns about humanity's place in the galactic community. Zara's final argument addressed these concerns directly. She explained that humans were not violent by nature. Despite their incredible combat capabilities, their healing abilities made them naturally inclined toward helping others. Their endurance gave them patience that other species lacked, and their adaptability made them excellent partners for scientific collaboration. The same evolutionary pressures that had made them nearly indestructible had also given them psychological traits that made them valuable allies rather than threats. The evidence she presented was overwhelming, and even the most skeptical council members were forced to acknowledge that her findings represented a fundamental shift in galactic understanding of biological possibilities. Humans had evolved on a world so hostile that it had forged them into living examples of what organic life could achieve under the most extreme conditions imaginable. As Zara concluded her presentation and prepared to return to her research, she reflected on how much her own understanding had changed since first meeting Jake Morrison in the docking bay of New Horizons Station. She had begun her study expecting to catalog another species for the galactic databases, but instead had discovered creatures whose very existence redefined what life could accomplish. The galaxy would never view humans the same way again, and Zara knew that her research had opened the door to new possibilities for all species. If humans could achieve such biological perfection through evolutionary pressure, perhaps other species could learn from their example and push their own limitations. The future of galactic civilization had been changed forever by the discovery. That life, when pushed to its absolute limits, could become truly magnificent.